Aloha, everybody. Thank you for joining our Hawaii Economic Association webinar this afternoon. My name is Leslie Harvey, Board President of the Hawaii Economic Association and Guild Consulting Partner. We are so pleased to welcome back Neil Milner and Colin Moore, both familiar faces around here, having moderated and otherwise participated in our webinars and events numerous times. In fact, I believe it was Neil who joined us to moderate our prior 100-day conversation with previous Governor David Ige, and Colin joined us just a little over a month ago, moderating our webinar featuring Dr. Ruben Juarez for discussion on the ongoing impacts of COVID-19. Today, we welcome Governor Josh Green, sworn in on December 5th, which I looked up. It's literally his 100th day of office today. So we are going to hear about Governor Green's vision for the state and what he has encountered thus far in office. A heads up to everybody, we are recording this webinar and we are joined by media who are covering this event. HEA members, like always, are invited to participate in our Q&A by using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. We'll field those questions throughout, and towards the end of our event, we'll have an opportunity to have an in-depth discussion on those Q&A questions. Q&A is strictly a member benefit, and if it's something you're interested in, HEA membership is only $40 for the year. Event resources, including slides and the event recording, will be provided after this event. At the end of today's webinar, please take a moment to let us know how we did via the feedback form. We'll share that link with you at the end, and attendees will also receive that link via email. If you have any technical issues during the webinar, please feel free to send us a message via chat. I'm going to briefly introduce Neil and Colin and then turn it over to them to continue the discussion. First up, Neil Milner is a former political science professor at the University of Hawaii, where he taught for 40 years. He currently serves as affiliate faculty with the University of Hawaii's Matsunaga Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution and the Public Policy Center. He's a political analyst and a columnist and a regular contributor to Hawaii Public Radio's The Conversation. His most recent book is The Gift of Underpants. Next up, Dr. Colin Moore is an associate professor at the Matsunaga Institute for Peace and the University of Hawaii Economic Research Organization at the University of Hawaii. Prior to joining the faculty at UH, he served as a research fellow at Yale's University Center for the Study of American Politics and as a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Fellow in Health Policy Research at the University of California, Berkeley. He received his PhD from the Department of Government at Harvard University. Dr. Moore has a deep interest in local politics and public policy in Hawaii and frequently provides political analysis for media outlets across the state. Welcome back, gentlemen. So pleased to have you. Thank you, Governor Green, for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to the three of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Governor, for spending the end of your first 100 days with us. And thanks for coming. I want to start off with one question about COVID, but it's about the impact that COVID had on you, the pandemic. How did it change your view of leadership? And how did it change your view of how the state runs?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Neil, for the question. And thank you all for including me. So how did it affect me? What it did was it showed me that we have to be clear and transparent at all times if we want people to trust us and if we want to get good results. It was partially an experiment, the way we, in my office as Lieutenant Governor, approached COVID. And I say experiment not on the science, but on the communication and the actual interface that we had with the public. Heretofore, I'm not sure anyone ever just went straight to data, real raw data. Of course, the whiteboard became kind of its own small phenomenon, which was fun. I'm still looking at it. It's in kind of out of the corner of my eye. I was filling in some numbers today because I still keep track of where we are and how safe we are. But that had a big impact on me. Interestingly, that was discussed a lot about whether a lieutenant governor should communicate that much and what that might do in the kind of hierarchy of government. But at the same time, I am a physician. We were in a pandemic. I was lieutenant governor. So it fell to me to take a big role. And I do not mind having set that standard, because now I have a lieutenant governor and I hope and expect her to thrive in her area of excellence and to communicate. But I think it was pretty unprecedented. And so that helped me a lot. It also put me into contact with several different departments that I now have as members of my cabinet. So I got very close to them. For example, the Adjutant General, General Hara, the Department of Health. I see in Department of Health leadership what I do, I do kind of put at the top of my priority list for what their skill set is and what I didn't think was as important. So it really informed a lot. Finally, it helped me because it forced me to ask economic questions that I wouldn't have asked before, because our economy was in an existential space because of the shutdown. It's been almost 3 years to the day since we basically shut down the state with COVID, with our COVID rules. We opened on October, I want to say 15th of 2020. So we had that period of about 7 months. We were facing the prospect of not opening until May. And had that happened, I think it's safe to say we would not have had an economic recovery like we've had. So it really trained me up. And as lieutenant governor, you can either do very little or you can choose to dive in. And I benefited from, the training.
So just a quick follow-up. So the day before COVID started, if someone had asked you in 25 words how you viewed state government and how it worked, how would that 25 words change now, or wouldn't it?
Oh, it changed totally, because the day before COVID, I was unaware people could communicate directly. Once we passed through the COVID Overton window, if I may, I realized that you can choose to communicate however you like in government. And that's a big change for me. It was transformational for me.
Okay. Colin.
Governor, before we get to some more detailed policy questions, I wanted to follow up a little bit on that and just ask a broader question, something I'm genuinely curious about, which is in the first 100 days in office. I mean, you've had a lot of jobs, you've been a physician, state senator, but in the first 100 days, what surprised you most about being governor?
The thing that surprised me most was how much interface I have with the military. I was quite stunned that I was asked to have so many meetings with so many of the officials that are at the highest ranks in our country. They obviously need to interface better with us because of Red Hill. I also can tell that they, like the Senate, like the House, are trying to feel out what kind of person I'll be as governor. And it's very impactful as to how we will handle our relationship, because we're looking at the future of the military and how it's affected by the leases that will come up kind of toward the latter part of this decade. So that was a big surprise to me. Of course, suddenly to be the person to make decisions was a change, but I'll tell you, I had that experience once before. When I was a medical resident going from internship in my residency to second year, interns don't make all the final decisions. They always ask for help, and there's always someone there behind you just in case when you're facing some big question, someone's life or death situation. The transition from lieutenant governor to governor felt very much like that transition from being an intern to a second year resident as a physician, because all of a sudden I woke up and 4 days in, when the Hawaii life flight crash occurred, and we had to take immediate action, I realized in that moment that people would rely on me to make the decisions, not just to give input.
Let me follow up for a second on what you just said about working with the military. I mean, you're the governor of a small state with a huge military presence. I mean, how do you think about this evolving relationship between the state and the military? What kind of leverage do you have, and what's your plan to use that to the state's benefit?
Well, first and foremost, it's my job to look out for our people here. So I have to prioritize clean water and our safety just as residents of the state of Hawaii, as citizens. There is absolutely a broader consideration for the decisions I make and how they'll affect America. So I was a little surprised at how much attention we got when Jamie and I went to Washington for the National Governors Association. That was evident. I've got this calculation in my mind that in spite of our size, we are probably about 30 to 50 times as more relevant, more impactful than our population would suggest, because of the question in China and Taiwan, because the question of North Korea, because of the need for us to, be a part of the geopolitical scene in the Pacific, and all the environmental questions that come from that too. So we are a much larger factor in kind of the nation's political scene than you would guess. And that's an important responsibility. But I still tend to worry more about our water under Red Hill than I worry about Taiwan or North Korea, just because it's so much more immediate. Those things seem somewhat abstract. Of course, I do get security briefings, and I'm very mindful to be kind of a cool head on those things, because I know the military has to make their own decisions, but I worry about our kids drinking water. That's more the family doctor in me.
And what's been the reception from the military when you've confronted them on this issue?
I've been very direct. They have been respectful. In fact, they have been very thoughtful in their approach to me. Like I said, I've been direct to the point of saying, guys, the future of our bases and the future of the leases depends on whether or not you actually are a part of our Ohana. And I have said on a few occasions, I don't want people even using the word Ohana or Aloha if they don't mean it. In other words, if you're part of our family, then you'll be part of our family, and you'll actually take to heart the need to be safe around Red Hill, to be transparent, to basically help us with our infrastructure. I've spoken to them about housing and our housing needs. I told the military, anyone who's not working on housing and our infrastructure is missing the point and doesn't understand Hawaii. And so they get it. I have the luxury of being a straight talker and a fresh face, and I'm not rude in any way. I have an incredible amount of respect for the work that the military does, but I also have a very strong dose of skepticism about how they've behaved in the past towards our environment. So it's an interesting relationship to get going. It'll play out over the course of at least these 4 years. And I would like to find real meaningful compromise. For example, we're already working closely with them to restore a lot of land back to the state of Hawaii, over 100,000 acres, I believe, on Big Island alone. That would help. It would help because having land go back into, our possession, to have the Hawaiian community be able to access the land they've been promised, that's a big deal. And I think that will also carry a lot of weight when we ultimately determine whether the leases are fully signed again, the extent that they should go deep into the future, whether or not it's safe. We've had more than just Red Hill. We also had the depleted uranium question on the Big Island, which was kind of brushed underneath the carpet for a long time until it became clear that that was an issue. Different things are on the minds of people. And I think that that's why we have to be transparent. I've already formed actually quietly an oversight committee in the governor's office, and we will start having very regular meetings. And I intend to whiteboard our findings, just like we did with COVID. So that goes back to Neil's question, like, what did you pick up from your COVID experience? Well, a way to communicate and a way that people can understand it.
Thanks, Governor. I'll turn it back to you, Neil.
So I think you managed to find a job where your hours are even longer than they were when you were a medical resident. So I want to talk about the tax plan for a while. You mentioned straight talk. If you have to explain to a person the answer to this question, I see how I and a lot of other people are getting breaks. Where's the money going to come from in the short run to pay for the reduction in state revenues? And where is it going to come from in the long run?
Yes, great question. So the question is, where's the money come from? It comes from our surplus right now, and the fact that we have not only a really hefty surplus, but also the outlook on our economy is quite good. I know that we always worry, and that's why we come back and amend bills and look at plans, but we have a projected multi-billion-dollar surplus going forward, even with the council revenue changes. So we have the money on hand. And the other important thing people should know is this $315 million tax break for families going up to, I believe, $129,000. All of that money, every penny that we don't tax people that they keep will be respent in our economy immediately, because those are individuals that are living month to month at best, really almost week to week. So it's the classic debate about whether or not you give tax breaks to rich people or people in the middle class. You should give it to people in the middle class, the working class, because they spend their money.
So in the long run, what are you saying? You're saying that the economy will generate enough revenue in the longer run, whatever that long run means, in the longer run, after the surplus starts to drop, that will increase the revenues that would continue to pay for it.
Yes, in two ways. For one, even with they were very conservative, and they tend to be very conservative. I appreciate that, Council of Revenues. Even with that reduction in expectations, we still will approach $1 billion year over year, at least in surplus that we still have. Remember, my budget includes also $500 million fully set aside for the rainy day fund. So we have that cushion and we have the revenue for taxes. But honestly, we can't afford not to give people some tax relief. The specifics will come out of the legislature, but mostly it's like increasing their deductions, individuals' deductions, the standard deduction, and pegging things to inflation. We have to do that because otherwise we will have no workforce whatsoever to help us. You know, right now we have a hospital crisis. In other words, the hospitals are so full that it's hard to find a bed sometimes for a patient when they get sick. It's because we don't have long-term care staff at the long-term care facilities right now to keep wards open and take people for recovery. We just don't have them because we can't find the bodies because they're often other jobs. So we need people to be able to afford to live here. And that's why all of this is one economic ecosystem. It's super important that we make it possible for regular working people to be able to survive in Hawaii.
Does it even make sense to talk about a middle class in Hawaii when now almost 50% of the people are essentially, I mean, I know what the Alice data says, essentially one paycheck away from a significant disaster. So where's the middle class now? Is it just a term that we use because it's a comfortable term so we don't have to say blue collar?
We could say people who work, that would be fine too. You know, the limits on the tax break, or the focus of the tax break, goes from about like $40,000 of earnings for family four up to $129,000.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, people making $120,000, that's a fair amount of money, but they are still very likely not saving any extra money for their kids' college tuition or having extra expendable earnings to go and buy a new car or whatever. So I've always thought of people in that space as doing pretty well, but in Hawaii, you could still very well be near the edge. And if you're at maybe $60,000 or $65,000 of earnings for yourself and your significant other, and say maybe one kid, you can't really afford to live here without serious help. So that's why all that money goes back to them. And the people that benefit the most in we call it the GAP plan. That's just the acronym for Green Affordability Plan. The people that benefit the most are the ones that have children getting preschool education where there is a lot of expense, because an individual then could get as much as $5,000 per child, up to 2 children back. So like a single dad or single mom that's working would actually be able to keep their kid in preschool and still do their jobs. That's why we structured it that way.
Let me jump in here and ask a question from the audience. Governor, if you had to choose between GET relief, greater credits, or exempting food and income tax relief, higher standard deduction, personal exemptions, which one would you opt for? Which do you think would be more impactful?
There's no question about it. The GAP plan is much more impactful for people in need, though I like both. And in our plan, we did put tax credits for food. So that's important. The difference is this: if you have a super surplus, you can do both. If you have more modest amounts of money, you can only do one, and you have to focus on the people that are really struggling to survive. Remember, the general excise tax, 30 to 40% of that comes from travelers, from visitors. So we need that money from them. And though the general excise tax is quite regressive, it will only save families a couple $100 if we do that each, as opposed to an average of about $2,000 per family for the GAP plan. So the GAP plan is just richer in its benefit for local people.
It's hard to explain that to the average person who thinks that the general excise tax, the relief of that is really significant freedom. You talk about needing to communicate.
Yes, you're totally right, because it's a lot easier just to say we're getting rid of the general excise tax, as opposed to explaining in great length, increasing a person's standard deduction, getting an earned income tax credit and so on. But look, it's not too complicated, really. You may have to have an accountant. You certainly will have to have QuickBooks or something to file, and we'll do a lot of education. But there's a lot more money for local families in the GAP plan than there is in relief from general excise tax. Though we're looking at both, there are some pieces of the general excise tax relief that we could do, which are just civilized. But it's that's kind of a broader tool to tax people who are visitors. And I'm a big believer in that. One of the other things that is going to pass, I don't know which form yet, but that's the green fee. And it looks like the tax or the green fee will probably be applied to certain locations across the state, only from essentially people who want to visit certain areas. Now, the benefit of that, though, is it decreases the impact immediately where we overuse certain parts of our natural resource, and it puts money right into our environmental plans. If we were smart about this and figured out a good way, which we can figure out a good way to collect, say, $50 per person that comes in here, you can do the math very easily. Let's say you do it people who are over age 12, so you don't hit kids, but you could get as many as like 8 million travelers tied into that. 8 million travelers times $50 is a lot of money for the state of Hawaii. And I think that we should be doing that. But sometimes we have to walk before we run, and the legislature is going to put in some thoughtful legislation in the end to help us.
Since you mentioned tourism, Governor, let me follow up with a question about tourism policy. What do you think the future of HTA is? I mean, that there are two main contenders in the ledge right now to overhaul it, to replace it. Both of those bills crossed over. Is there an approach you prefer, or should HTA just remain unchanged?
Well, I think that ultimately, and I don't say this to dismiss any sponsor of legislation, I think it probably will survive for 2 more years at least. It'll give me enough time to kind of reshape government in a calm way. I think that the proposal we put out, we fixed a problem that was lingering, which was how we're going to both market and manage tourism. So our team, and I want to give a special shout out to Chris Sadeasu, who's my nominee for DBED director. He worked very hard on that. And we put out the RFP without a lot of pomp and circumstance. That's the thing that was looking like pretty much a circus at the end of the last administration. So now that's going to go forward. And I'd like to see us actually manage tourism better. I don't know who will win those bids. It's not my business, actually. That goes through the process like it should legally. But now we will market and manage tourism kind of more conscientiously. And the HTA will have to fall in line with that. That's definitely what I believe we should do for the state of Hawaii. And management of tourism means really injecting the cultural components properly into tourism, making people respect what we do. Then you can expand ecotourism. You can have people actually participate in our solutions in a positive way. There's so much good that comes out of it. Plus, it gives us an opportunity to raise revenues for climate work, which is, I think, also something that Hawaii stands to do well by if we step up. So I think HTA survives. I think we raise significant resources and start putting that towards DLNR and tourism management. And I think you'll notice that will be one of our main achievements as the administration goes forward.
So you're pretty sure that you've overcome the dynamics that messed up the last couple of proposals? And
I think we did. I basically what I did is I said nobody can give people hints or play any inside baseball on this. Let's just get an RFP out. We make 2 arms of it so people can bid however they choose, and then score it objectively. Do not mess around, because one of the problems is if you have a disgruntled party, they could enter into litigation and then everybody loses. I say this as a doctor who definitely does not like to see money spent on lawyers. Apologies to my wife, who's an attorney. Okay, so I think that this is a good solution. It's $38 million for marketing, $29 million for management of tourism, and there are some resources that are flexible also, should we do something special like the FestPack? We haven't talked about that, but FestPack would be a festival in June next year, which would bring 26 nations together to come to Hawaii for the first time. It would be an enormous event, and they're in town right now vetting us, which has been wonderful because Jamie and I were honored to host them at Washington Place last night. But that kind of revenue through tourism is special, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is a signature thing also of our first 4 years, or our 4 years. I shouldn't be presumptuous.
So as long as we're on this subject, touching the legislature, you know, there are two messages that come out now when you talk about the at least two big ones. One of which is you said about their economic plans that you're okay with, you're very flexible as long as it benefits the people who should be benefited. On the other hand, you've been coming down pretty hard on some very key legislators about being bullies. How do you play that dynamic? How do you, what's it like every day to be able to be in that situation?
You know, it's an interesting dance. I'm playing it totally straight. Okay. If I believe in something and we have a good conversation, I'm going to be all in supporting it. If someone oversteps bounds that I don't think are civil or are unkind, I'm just going to point it out. And we've had some interesting conversations. I do meet with the leadership a lot, an unbelievable amount, in fact, for this, you know, the House and Senate. And that's important. I also have one-on-one meetings with all the legislators because there's this kind of myth that I was an outsider and some people just plain couldn't deal with me. That's just my rivals, and everybody has that. That is just totally normal. I happen to have had a lot of success because people embraced me and Jamie, and I got to serve as lieutenant governor and governor, but I don't actually have an animosity with almost anybody. Having said that, the Senate is testing me a little bit, and that's okay. They need to. Would I like to have all of my people confirmed? Of course, but you can't even say that I'm right on every nomination. They have every right to call into question whether someone's got the skill set or the preparation or the wherewithal to do the job. All I'm saying is do not whack people over the head with a bat, and we can probably all get along then. And sometimes that happens. I was a very different kind of legislator. I did not ever go after people. I just didn't do that. The one time I spoke up civilly about Carlton Ching, and I met with the governor, and I just told him I thought it was the wrong fit, that he'd probably be better in a different department. Sometimes that comes back to haunt me now because people compared, you know, that moment with this. They're actually quite different, but I get it. I have a lot of respect for all of the senators, including people who are friends, like Senator Kim and I are friends. We met the other day. We can't always agree, but I still want people to be given a fair shot when at all possible, because we have a lot of work to do. And the work has been going on. I mean, we're here on day 100. We've done an unbelievable amount of stuff. We released all those grants and aid, the 50 million. We fixed the tourism situation. I have the details on the stadium plan if you guys want it. What else have we done? We've dealt with the air life flight crisis. We got land back from the military. We have a major tax plan. We built a cabinet. I mean, the list goes on. And that's with my people in a holding pattern and not fully confirmed yet. So I kind of just want to make sure we're all in for the job.
So let me wait. Two quick things. One is this a new plan for the stadium that you're going to release? I mean, you say that you could give us guys. You know, you probably know why I'm asking. And secondly, I want to come back later in the context to the university and how this issue fits into university. The bullying issue is really part of a broader issue. But sorry, Colin, go ahead.
Yes, do you want me to answer those questions?
Go ahead, answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, you want to answer those now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we've reached consensus. There's still some nuanced minor differences between the House and Senate, perhaps, but we've reached consensus. I will put out an RFP that will be $350 million to build the stadium, $49.5 million to do the demolition and additional costs in that process. So that'll be $399.5 million. Revenues from naming, which will range somewhere between $1.6 million and $3 million a year, will go towards the building of the stadium. And then any additional resources that a private developer, whoever wins the RFP, would like to invest, they can. They will get a contract, presumably of about 25 years, to operate and manage the stadium, and we will go forward. So it will not be under the university per se. It will be under the stadium consortium or the stadium authority with the support of HHFDC. Those minor details will be spelled out in the RFP, but we'll go forward with that. And we will go forward with another RFP to do the entertainment district and the housing component. And that's the plan. Now, could there be some very small changes? Of course. I'm going to continue to take input from the Senate and House leadership, but we've convened all of the top people, and I've been going the extra mile to get buy-in because I know the people want to get this done with. So that's a modest stadium that does not cause any large risk for over costs, which people are worried about. And it also gives us the opportunity to do the housing, which is super important. I really appreciate the input that Donovan Delacruz, Senator Delacruz, gave me on this. I have to tell you that infrastructure plan he's promoting is good. I really appreciate the fact that the leadership at the House and Senate are willing to kind of compromise, because one position focused more on the university, the other more on the stadium authority. So I have to make this call ultimately. I am asking our attorneys to see if this can be considered an amendment rather than a significant change. What you've heard a lot of, and if we don't have to do a full new RFP, it will save us about 10 months. But I'm going to do just like we did with the tourism work. We have to do it right so no one sues us. And the same thing goes here. We have to do it right so that no one can contest the award and sue us. I hate delay and I hate waste. So that's the goal.
Colin,
Let me, because we only have 10 minutes left. Let me hit one of the other major issues that you're dealing with right now, which is Hawaiian Homelands and the challenge to spend $600 million. And in an earlier Civil Beat interview, you described this as the elephant in the room, and it's this huge project. So what major challenges do you see, and how are you going to make the elephant work? How are you going to spend this money in such a short period of time?
Yes. So thank you for the question. So first, I do need a chair of DHHL, right? So that is likely to be Kali Watson. I'm hearing that he likely has more than enough support for confirmation. He's a good guy. I also want to say this kind of in the bright light of the day. Ikaika Anderson is a very good guy too, and would have made a very good DHHL chair. It didn't go that way, so we mahalo Ikaika for applying and being a part of that. So it's a $600 million project. We have a list already of multiple developments that can be built out. For example, one in my old district, Laiopua, that means some extra water support and build. And if there are ways for us to acquire some developments that are already halfway done but stalled, I'm into that. In other words, anything that puts housing into the Hawaiian people's hands that are on the list, I'm going to support. I felt from the beginning, and I still think we should be a little bit more creative with the money rather than just building and not doing infrastructure and trying to multiply that money. But I don't want to fight with the legislature. I really don't. It's too important that we build housing, whether it's Hawaiian Homelands housing or affordable housing along the rail line or Kauhale in small, kind of nooks and crannies of our state. There's just too much work for me to be fighting with anybody, so I'm not going to do it. So we're going to give Kali a $600 million budget to build as much housing as he can in 4 years. And I actually would not be surprised if not only do we succeed, but that the legislature sees that as an opportunity to expedite housing for local people, because we're not really able to be discriminating when we do other housing projects. And a lot of people from the mainland try to buy up the houses that we build because they're so valuable. But in the case of Hawaiian Homelands, we really can honor our commitments to the Hawaiian people, which includes so many people on my cabinet and team. We have a lot of Hawaiian leadership in our team. My wife, her family, they share with me the challenges they've had over the generations. I take it to heart. I just think that we want to get going. So we have a list, and I leave it to Kali to make sure that he prioritizes it. I'm not into micromanaging things. I try to provide executive leadership and direction, and then trust the directors. Like, for instance, on this Hawaiian Homelands, I want Kali to determine what are the easiest projects to get done. On the Hawaii Life Flight Challenge, I want Kenny Fink, Dr. Fink, to determine exactly how much resource has to be put in to secure the system, and whether we need to support some of the people that are flying right now, or bring in some extra support going forward. I trust them because they're experts. I'm an expert in a couple things, but not everything. So I think you're going to see really good results. One of the things I hope you guys see that I'm doing is I'm trying to change the tone in government. The reason I responded so firmly when we had the fights between the Senate and the confirmations was because a couple things happened. One, and we've reconciled, made up. One of the senators made personal attacks against my housing director in a public meeting. And you can't make personal attacks against anybody. You definitely should not do it against a woman of color who's had to fight her way up as a single mom and's done so well in her profession. You can't do that. So I don't accept that anymore as how we can govern, and I'm just calling it out. And the subsequent fights that we had, which again, I acknowledge are part of the game here, they got a little too personal. And so it was my job as the governor to say, this is not okay. This is not what we're going to be like as a state. Now, I don't know if it's going to take 2 months or 2 years to convince people that that's the way we're going to be in Hawaii. But after all, isn't that what the spirit of aloha is? So I figure that's a good place to start.
The university fight seems to be a little bit broader than that. Essentially it was, I agree with you, there was a good deal of bullying going on, and a kind of attack on the president of the university that you would see as not proper behavior. But there's this context of autonomy that legislators have been picking at for years that seems to be at the base of that. How do you see your relationship with the university developing?
I'm very supportive of the university. I'm very supportive of higher education in general, having benefited personally from that. My life was made possible because people let me get higher education. So I went to this great college called Swarthmore College, and then I got to go to medical school. So
Colin is smiling because he's a distinguished alumnus.
Yes, he is. We are proud of Colin also. And so is our coach. Our basketball coach was a Swarthmore alum too, just by sheer coincidence, which is a strange thing. But he can't dunk the basketball. So the truth is, higher education is super important. And I think we have to be mindful to be a little bit more hands-off, as long as they're achieving milestones that are necessary. Look, it is our state institution, right? It's our state educational higher education institution. We also love a couple of the privates, but UH is what we have. And we have a workforce problem. We have to get out of their way. I had this conversation with some of the senators, and we may have to agree to disagree, but micromanaging other entities is not really what we're supposed to do as legislators. We're supposed to lead. We're supposed to set policy, but we're not supposed to pick and choose individuals in certain jobs. I will tell you this, the likelihood that President Laster stays on longer is higher now, because he's not the kind of guy that wants to back down, and I don't blame him. I think that these are lessons that people will learn. Do I agree with him on everything? No, I don't. I think we should be a little bit more open-minded about our athletics program. I think we should encourage other people to perhaps apply to be the athletic director. And I have a lot of respect for the people that are applying now already, but I think we should be more open. And just like I try not to micromanage, we all have to step away. But I really appreciate President Laster, and 10 years is a pretty long run. And the university has been showing great signs of success.
Governor, we only have a few minutes left, so I want to ask you a question about one of the other big issues, which is ethics reform. And you talked about changing the culture in state government. So I'll just ask you this very directly. Do you think Hawaii has a culture of corruption in its legislature and executive agencies, or have these scandals we've seen over the past few years really just been the results of the mistakes of a few individuals? And, just in a couple of minutes, there's so many proposals passing through the ledge right now. What do you think is really going to be most impactful?
So I don't think there's a culture of corruption. I just think that people, they got complacent, and a few individuals made terrible decisions. They are paying for those terrible decisions. Most legislators, most people in government just want to do their job and do well. So I do not think it's a culture of corruption, but I do think that there has to be a lot more sunshine. I think that there has to, at least we have to entertain some real changes. Look, I support term limits, actually. I would support 8 years in the House and 8 years in the Senate. And if people go to the executive branch, they have, 2 terms at the most. I think that's good. We have limits on other people in other professions, including judges. So I think that does make sense. I think that you have to actually just open up the reporting mechanisms about when donations are made. Why not make that in real time or within, say, 48 to 72 hours? Then people could see if large donations are flowing in times of decision making. That kind of sunshine is a great disinfectant. It's difficult otherwise to do a lot of these things because a lot of them are constitutionally difficult, but there should be. And I intend to also open up a lot as far as sharing information. We're going to see legislation. I'm waiting to see what comes through, and what legislation doesn't do, I will do through executive order if I have to. So there's a lot that can be done. But the big questions have to be settled by the legislature, things like term limits and others. That's a lot of years, remember, because if someone wanted to continue their career, there are, of course, other options in the Congress and the US Senate and so on, if they've succeeded. As we saw, someone who's very dear to me, actually. This may sound unlikely because we were competitors at one time, but I'm a fan now of Congresswoman Takuda. We were working together yesterday on an issue, and she invited me to the State of the Union address that President Biden gave. Look, she made it, right? She served in the state Senate, and then she fought through a race and it was real tight. And then now she's in Congress. And we saw the same thing for Senator Hirono. Senator Hirono was in the legislature, then she was lieutenant governor. She didn't quite make it to the governorship, but she ended up as a US senator. It's happened to a lot of people. So there's no harm in having that experience. We will get some good reform. I think the legislature was put on notice because of the individuals that were bad actors.
Governor Green, I know you have to go, but thank you so much for taking the time to answer our questions this afternoon. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yes,
Thanks,
thanks, Governor.
If you need me back in the future, I'm there. And Neil, I'm reading your column. So all those snarky comments, just give me a ring and I will tell you what I'm really thinking.
You're the politest legislator that has ever called me. And it was way back about the EGA appointment. Yeah, no, thank you. And I appreciate the word snarky because I guess that's what I am. Thanks again, Governor.
It's only said out of love. And I would never,
Yes.
I would never criticize a fellow Swarthmorean.
Thanks so much, Governor. We appreciate it.
Take care, guys.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Well, Neil, I'll ask you this question, which is, how do you think you did? What do you think's changed between Lieutenant Governor Green and Governor Green?
Well, I mean, first of all, how he did, let me just say it from a personal interview standpoint. It was a fascinating experience to interview Governor Ige, but it was not an easy experience. And those of you who saw it, and it's pretty clear why. This is a very different way of talking. It's a very different way of approaching problems. It's less process oriented. He's less, the previous governor, and I don't want to dwell on this comparison, but the previous governor had a great sense of faith in the ability to follow a process and it will come out all right. And he did that on TMT. So in that sense, and I think I think that as far as I was concerned, it was straight talk. If you have a lot more time, you would push him on stuff. But as far as I'm concerned, I thought he did a good job, and he does it in a conversational way that invites other conversation, which is a very important communication skill to have. He doesn't say it in a way that I'm definitive, end of story.
I agree, and I think the distinction you're drawing here between Governor Ige being very process oriented and Governor Green being, well, for lack of a better term, more results oriented, I think is probably the right one. I mean, and also his communication style. I mean, I think you're going to see a lot more of him, like he said, taking this directly to the people. I mean, the lesson that he learned from COVID and using his famous whiteboard. We haven't had a governor, well, maybe Governor Abercrombie, but certainly not Governor Ige, who is so comfortable using the bully pulpit. And I think as he gets more pushback from the legislature, you're going to see more of these direct appeals to the people. My concern, if there is one, is that there can be real costs to being less process oriented. I mean, to sort of trying through all variety of ways to end up at the place you want to end up. And you could run afoul of various processes, or in a state and a place that does tend to be very process oriented. I could see him, a real coalition developing to oppose that over time. I mean, we're still within the first 100 days. He's a very popular governor, was elected overwhelmingly, and still has a lot of public support. But will that wear over the next 2 or 3 years? People are going to feel like he, goes from being more results oriented to, experiencing the criticisms that were lodged against Governor Abercrombie, that, he's bullying people or, ignoring important interests that are part of his political coalition.
I think there's something else to watch here, because the governor is so good at presenting his ideas with a sense of optimism that doesn't seem arrogant. But you have to remember, particularly in this state, the huge difference between having a policy and what ultimately comes out at the end. If you think about the stadium, it's really refreshing that he's going to have a proposal. I can't help but thinking, so what? What's going to happen down the line? And it's the same with the Hawaiian homelands. It's, there's a time limit built in. To putting it another way, this is a state that there's always this huge difference in time between what politicians are saying is good and what you benefit from in your lifetime or in a short period of time. You always have to remind people like Josh Green that that's an issue. And he hasn't had to face that issue yet because it's only been 100 days. But when certain things start to slow down, if you think about what Mayor Belangiardi found as soon as he walked in, that there were so many obstacles to do what he wanted, that he really switched his focus to talking about obstacles. I mean, his discussion about permitting and planning is very much along the lines of that. So that's not on the governor for not talking about it. It's on the citizens to pay attention to that down the road, especially in a state where we've had some abject failures in implementing policies.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us this morning or this afternoon, and it was great to hear from Governor Green. And I think we'll turn it back over to Leslie.
Thank you both, Colin and Neil. We always so appreciate having you on. What a fun conversation that was today. Big mahalo to Governor Josh Green for making the time to join us. I most certainly enjoyed hearing those pointed questions. Not so snarky, but I did appreciate Governor's really candid responses for those. As we discussed just a few short weeks ago, we have a long way to go to address just about any issue, and I'm grateful for Governor, for Colin, and for Neil to continue these discussions, to continue learning. Mahalo to our attendees for joining us today, and thank you especially to Paul Migliorato and Heather Walters, who facilitated, much of the behind the scenes coordination. Please mark your calendars to join us next month for an online discussion of Hawaii's manufacturing sector with Dr. Harm GM Steenhouse. And don't forget to complete the feedback form for today's event. Thank you for returning attendees and to those attendees who are joining us for the first time. As you know, we strive to make our events relevant and beneficial to Hawaii's diverse business community by tackling topics that are pertinent and breaking them down to make them accessible to a broad audience. We hope that you found this to be the case today, and we look forward to your feedback. Mahalo for your time and attention, and aloha. Thank you.